is Brooke Shepard. I'd like to welcome you to our Utah Valley Homeschool Mini Conference of 2020. I'm so sorry that I can't be there with the other presenters. Right now we are quarantining as we were exposed to COVID this last week. But I would like to give a special thanks to all of our presenters for giving their time and knowledge, and also to Jared Campos, Michael Stuffelbeam, and Katrina Campos, who are providing all the technical knowledge to stream this conference, provide the music, and make sure everything runs smoothly. After this conference, you will receive one more email that will include a transcript from the Children's Point of View panel and the questions and answer panel. You will also receive a link to the recordings and documents with recommended homeschooling material, such as curriculum, podcasts, and how to submit an affidavit. Today's schedule will be as follows. We will first introduce ourselves and the methods and types of homeschooling. After our introductions, we will discuss what homeschooling looks like for us personally. At 11 o'clock, we will go over some curriculum. We will then break for lunch at 12. At 1 o'clock, we will reconvene with the children's panel. 2 o'clock is socialization. 2:30 is taking care of yourself. 3 o'clock, adapting your homeschool to fit your child. 3:30, homeschooling through adverse circumstances. And last, at 4 o'clock, is the question and answer panel. In between each presentation, we will have a short 5 to 10 minute break. To begin our first presentation of what does homeschooling look like, we will introduce ourselves. As I said, my name is Brooke Shepard. I've been homeschooling since 2016, so 4 years. Two things I love to do are teaching and dancing. I'm a classically trained ballerina. Before I share my homeschooling origin story and what my homeschooling day looks like, I want to give you a little background as to why I believe education is incredibly important. Education has always been a high priority in my family and myself. Both of my grandfathers were unable to finish their secondary education. My mother's father was pulled out of school by his father during his 8th grade year so he could work and bring home extra money. He kept on reading in his spare time to continue his education. Many years later, he received his GED when he was 48. My dad's father dropped out of school in the 8th grade to work as well.
I'm Emily. I've been homeschooling for 10 years, since my oldest was in kindergarten. I have 11 children, ages 15 down to 10 months. I love reading, quilting, and playing with spreadsheets.
Hi, I'm Eleanor Peterson. I've been homeschooling for about 5 years, and I have 5 children. My oldest is 13 and my youngest is 16 months. And two things that I love doing are playing my viola and figure skating.
Hi, I'm Krista Stuffelbeam. I've been homeschooling for 4 years, and I love writing. I'm working on some novels, and I also play the piano. Oh, sorry. So now Emily is going to explain the different types and ways that you can homeschool, because we're going to be referring to these a lot throughout our presentations.
Hey, so we have some really cool different tools that we can use when we homeschool. And when we get any type of toolbox, we want to make sure that we're using the correct tools for our for our needs. So if we're building a birdhouse out of wood, we're not going to want a mechanic's toolbox with wrenches and things like that. We're going to want a toolbox with hammer and nails. So the first thing we do when we're homeschooling is we need to decide what our vision is. We need to understand the vision and the goals that we have. And if our goals are to homeschool for 10, 12, 15 years or 20 years or more, and then that will be different than if we're only planning on homeschooling for a couple of months. So the first thing is to figure out what your plan is, like what your goals are and your vision. But then there's lots of different ways that we can homeschool. There's obviously public school is its own separate thing, but schooling at home is a traditional method that basically tries to replicate public school at home. And it can be, it looks a lot closer to the public school because we're trying to replicate it, but it can be very time consuming, and it has the highest burnout rate of any method of homeschooling. Then there is the classical education model, which has an emphasis on preparing and conditioning the mind. And it's more curriculum led. Parents follow classical curriculum, sometimes piecing it together on their own. It has a high level of structure, and it encourages a high level of academic achievement, but it can often be really boring for other students and parents, and it's difficult to maintain over an extended time period. Then there's the unit studies method, which is more of a method than a philosophy. And it is a parent-led, where a parent chooses a type of unit to cover, and that unit covers all different subjects where you study real world things. So you would maybe do a unit on cooking, and you would cover math in cooking and reading in cooking and writing in cooking and chemistry, and lots of different things would all be in that one unit. Learning in context allows the students to understand why academics are important, but it can often be a lot of prep work for parents. Then there's the Charlotte Mason, Waldorf, and Montessori styles, which are all different philosophies. Charlotte Mason focuses on the whole child and includes a lot of nature studies and journal writing. Waldorf keeps all subjects integrated, similar to unit studies, and focuses on routines rather than schedules. And Montessori focuses on creating the correct environment and setting up an environment that children can learn in. All of these methods and philosophies require lots of setup, and not a lot. Waldorf doesn't require tons of setup, and Charlotte Mason uses natural surroundings more, but Montessori can tend to require lots of different setup. But they all can help children learn more naturally in context, but they also include a lot of parental involvement, and sometimes can be difficult for doing with multiple children or multiple ages. Then we can go all the way to the other side of the spectrum with structure and go to unschooling. And unschooling often sounds like we're neglecting our children's education, but it's actually more it's intentionally following children's interests and allowing the child to lead and direct where the education goes. So if a child is interested in crickets, we're going to go study crickets, and we're going to do everything we can until the child is bored with crickets. And then we're going to move on and see what they're interested in next. And this can be a really in-depth method, but it can also be difficult for parents to follow, especially with multiple children where they have lots of different interests, and it's hard to coordinate all of that. Then there's the leadership education, also known as the Thomas Jefferson education model. And this model is a little more dynamic in that it changes the way that you execute your homeschooling changes depending on the phase of learning that your children are in. So in core phase, it looks a lot like play, and it actually kind of mimics Charlotte Mason and Waldorf and some other more natural-based philosophies where children are learning through their surroundings. And there's very little structure other than basic routines. Then in their love of learning phase, which can be somewhere around 8 to 12 years old, we do more of an unschooling type approach where we follow children's interests, and we and sometimes create other environments to encourage them to be interested in things. And then in the older ages, the scholar phase, we expect students to start taking charge of their own education, to decide what they are interested in studying, and to take charge and study things on their own. And hopefully through their core phase, they have learned how to, and through their core and love of learning phases, they have learned how to enjoy learning, and they have learned how to put effort into things. One of the lessons of core phase is to learn to work hard. And we do that not through studying times tables, but through actually like cleaning the house and making meals and other actual work. So in the scholar phase, students really take charge of their own education because they have learned to work and they have learned to love learning. Then the last method or philosophy that I want to talk about today is eclectic. And eclectic basically just means that we pick and choose the best of the philosophies for our own situations. And we pick and choose the best for each student and for our family and our home environment. And we can make it whatever it is. And it's very easy to adapt to fit each child's needs. This does require parents to be aware of what their children are needing and to be willing to adapt to it. But it can be the most dynamic of all of these different styles. And I want to go back really quick to our toolbox. If each of these methods and philosophies are a different type of toolbox. One could be a mechanic's toolbox. One could be a carpenter's toolbox. They all have their own tools within those. And so the idea of eclectic homeschooling is to pick and choose the correct tools that you need from all these various toolboxes so that you can create the environment that is best for you and your family and your children. Thank you.
Caitlin won't be able to be with us until later today, but she wanted to make sure that she was able to share her story and experience with you. So she wrote it down and I'm going to read it for her. Caitlin went to local public schools through 5th grade. Even though she had good grades, public school was not a great fit for her. The days were draining and it grew into an unhealthy environment. Her parents took the leap against wide family disapproval and pulled her out. They pulled her siblings, all younger, out at the same time. She watched her mother creatively find ways to teach them the subjects she found important. Some curriculums were better fits than others, but Caitlin's parents actively supported her in her passions for botany and watercolor. As a junior, she started college, first with 1 class, then 2, then a full load. She did not get a high school diploma. After 2 more years at a university in another state, Caitlin found her spouse in an advanced chemistry lab. Kids followed. Caitlin had always planned to homeschool her children since she was a tween, and even though she got to watch her mother school her younger siblings, she still had trouble finding her feet. She was so worried those early years about networking and finding other families to homeschool with. She thought to participate in great homeschool co-ops, she needed to join the waiting list in kindergarten, like good charter schools. She has since learned that many experienced homeschool families choose to join formal co-ops when their eldest are tweens and do mother groups and playdates prior. In the midst of all this, she discovered blogs written by Asped individuals and recognized how they matched her children and herself. Caitlin and her husband have since built an environment tailored to sensory diets and intense interests, which is helping their Aspie household thrive. In addition, her husband and at least one of her children have ADHD. She is working to understand her ADHD family better and tailor their home to them as well. After their many-year journey, their family has found their stride and are growing together. This schedule is with a 2, 4, 6, and 7-year-old. Their times are soft and they rearrange as needed, but generally speaking, at 8 a.m. Everyone is up and they have breakfast. They are starting to have a pre-breakfast checklist. Sometimes Caitlin finds it helpful to have an audiobook playing while they eat. She says, honestly, I usually only get to do this great goal about once a week. And yes, it is the Book of Mormon. 9 a.m., breakfast is done, hopefully. And now I turn the kitchen over to my bigs for 10 minutes of table chores, her older children. I am delighted when they have done them within an hour. I check on my littles and start a load of laundry. This is a great time to catch the littles, snuggle them, and read a book if I didn't before breakfast. 10 a.m. Our lessons or recess. Lessons look like this. I have the next 2 lessons prepped in my blue caddy. I take it to the clean table we are using for the day while calling the kids to come. My 2 eldest are at nearly the same English level, so we do group spelling, handwriting, reading games. I gauge their attention span. We run as short as 10 minutes, usually 20, but no longer than an hour including distractions. It is just time to call it quits by that time. Meanwhile, my 4-year-old often listens in while coloring. When the olders are writing for a minute, I am getting better at sneaking a 5-minute lesson in for my preschooler. We sound out some things, or count something, or talk about what he drew and challenge him to make counterclockwise circles. My 2-year-old is often seeking second breakfast with Dublos in hand. I suspect his disruption levels are inversely proportional to my success of previous snuggled story time. 11 a.m. Now is break, usually recess. If we had recess earlier, sometimes we skip to lunch. I find recess is often 20 to 30 minutes, and she also moves her laundry over. At 12, around noon, we have lunch. We do table chores. 1 p.m. Currently, my toddler sleeps around 2, so I have time for a second school slot here. We use it to catch English if the morning didn't go to plan, or hopefully for a one-on-one in reading or math. History or science are special fun days. Clarifying, one-on-one in either reading or math, or history or science. A little note she put in here says, I have used nap time for school in the past, but only for a month or 2, and only because it wasn't happening at any other time. It really is better to have that time for myself. 2 p.m. is nap for the toddler and a break for mom. The kids get some free play. They have toys and projects that come out that they work on independently while their little sibling is sleeping. And 3 p.m. is when she starts on dinner. She says, there are many days this doesn't happen. I get to lessons usually 3 times a week. I also take the majority of May, June, and September off. We school the other months. I do not have a schoolroom. I started with a tall bookshelf and had my school items on the top 2 shelves. Later, I added additional space in more high shelves and even a locked cabinet. I find that a single shelf holds all the curriculum I use at any one time, but storing the stuff I am not using, like reference books, the next books, takes up more space. The locked cabinet and the lidded plastic totes hold math manipulatives and science tools and spare pencils. We use any clean table currently available. Sometimes I only have 1 table in my house, but with creativity, often more are available. Think coffee table, patio table, craft table, or even clipboards. Before I share my homeschooling origin story and what my homeschooling day looks like, I want to give you a little background as to why I believe education is incredibly important. Education has always been a high priority in my family and myself. Both of my grandfathers were unable to finish their secondary education. My mother's father was pulled out of school by his father during his 8th grade year so he could work and bring home extra money. He kept on reading in his spare time to continue his education. Many years later, he received his GED when he was 48. My dad's father dropped out of school in the 8th grade to work as well. This was during the Depression. At age 16, he left his family to work so they would have enough money to feed his siblings. He went back to school and received his high school diploma at the age of 89. He was the oldest graduate in the history of Hurricane High School. Both my grandfathers passionately expressed how important having an education is. They wanted their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren to have better lives than they did. They wanted their family to be able to get ahead in life, as the saying goes. My maternal grandfather said to me, "We use our education in every aspect of our lives. Math, physics, reading. If you can't read, you can't learn. You need to learn how to spell. If you can't spell, you won't understand the words." He went on to explain that knowing how to read and spell makes you better at conversations. It helps you be more empathetic and understanding to those you are conversing with. He talked about how important mathematics are and how we use them in everything we do. My grandfathers both knew what it was like to live their lives without having the education that many take for granted. Naturally, I inherited their passion for education. Now, on to my origin story. I was homeschooled from 8th grade through to my high school graduation. My mother had pulled my younger brother and sister out of school for multiple reasons. She asked me if I would like to try it out. I was a straight A student. I had no problems in school. I had a bunch of friends. I was one of the kids who just loved going to school. But I said sure. I also like trying new things, and if I didn't like it, then I could just go back to public school. I, however, loved homeschooling. I had done very well in public school, but I flourished with homeschooling. There was nothing holding me back. My mom put us into a private homeschool called American Heritage. It has no affiliation with the private school here in Utah, American Heritage. There were so many people telling her that she was going to ruin us children, but she persevered. The private homeschool was a lot like a co-op or a commonwealth would be today. The moms would teach the classes, and multiple families would send their kids to these classes. My class had about 8 kids in it. We attended 5 days a week, and it mimicked public school with some differences. For example, our devotional included religious studies. The classes were much smaller and shorter, and we followed our own calendar. We stayed with American Heritage for 2 years. After that, my family broke off on our own, and I started my high school correspondence course to get my diploma. I must explain that I started student teaching 6 years earlier in 1996 at the dance studio I attended. This started my love of teaching. The experience I gained over the years teaching dance assisted me when I started helping my mother with my younger siblings' education. I taught my younger siblings their history class and helped them here and there with other subjects while I finished my high school education. After I received my high school diploma, I went to college. I met my husband and moved with him to northern Utah, where I continued teaching dance while performing and finishing my degree. My love of teaching only grew. When my first child was born, I knew I wanted to homeschool him and all his siblings that would come. I did and still do send my children to a public school where they learn many things, including how to read. After that, we homeschool exclusively. I absolutely love it, and so do my kids. Most days. In the beginning, I was adamant about doing the traditional method or school-in-a-box method. We did one subject after the other, following each book and doing everything that was required. Let me tell you, it was exhausting. I was burned out by October, and this was only kindergarten. We tried switching curriculum. I tried a different schedule. It wasn't until I started letting go of the idea that my homeschool had to look like public school that things started falling into place. We got into a routine rather than a schedule. We still got all our subjects done in the day, and I had started my journey of letting go. I read books about homeschooling. I looked at blogs of homeschoolers. I joined homeschooling Facebook groups. I looked everywhere I could to glean information off of seasoned homeschoolers. I had a wonderful friend who introduced me to My Tech High. That was such a relief when we finally signed up for it. I kept calling her and asking her questions. Thankfully, she didn't mind and was more than helpful. She was my role model. I found curricula that fit my child better. It became more sporadic. I let go of my ridiculous expectations and whittled our routine down to what really mattered. I got a book about the Charlotte Mason method and loved it. However, it didn't work with every subject. So we adopted an eclectic method. Some subjects I used Charlotte Mason's method. Others I used the classical method. We did unit studies with others, and we kept a little bit of the traditional method. Now I have my 2 oldest that I'm homeschooling and my 4-year-old in preschool. We are loving our homeschooling journey. Each year is different. Each year it gets better. I like that our homeschooling style is flexible. I still get books about other methods of homeschooling and study each one. That way, I have more ideas to pick from. My normal homeschooling day has changed dramatically over the years. I created the co-op Cliff Rose Academy and found some great ladies, a few of which will be speaking today. We worked together to create an education program that fits our children rather than making our children fit an education program. We've made it so that all our subjects fit into the co-op. We start at 9 o'clock with a devotional. We use the Come Follow Me book from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to study scriptures. We talk about ethics. We sing and pray. After that, a volunteer mom will teach a subject. Since we are working together, we can get so much done. Our kids have access to so many classes: math, language arts, history, general science, chemistry, engineering, art, music, cooking. We have the Kerbal Space program, Lego storytelling to learn about stop animation, snap circuits, kiwi crates, etc. And the lessons? They're short, creative, and fun. We use the printed resources such as Sax and Math, but we modify what is required of our children. We make the curriculum work for us rather than us working for the curriculum. We have a recess and snack in the middle of the day, lunch around 12, and we're done with everything by 1:30. We only do school 3 days a week. This is so the kids have the other days to spend with their families, go on field trips, and of course to play. We have great people to go on field trips with. We have visited many places over the last 2 years: museums, zoos, tours, and so much more. My kids have so many good memories of doing school at home and with friends. Classes do not need to be long or rigorous. There is a misconception that a rigorous education is the only way to have a good education. Rigorous comes from the Latin rigor, or rigorosus, which means stiffness. The definition of rigorous is extremely thorough, exhaustive, or accurate. Being thorough is good. Being accurate is good. But I would argue that being well educated is better achieved when you allow the child room to wiggle, room to play, room to be creative. They will learn what they need to without being forced into a rigid, boxed education. When I changed my perception and no longer required a rigid, exhaustive education for my son, that's when things went smoother. School was more enjoyable, less tiring, and we actually got more done with less time. In addition to the co-op, my kids are learning piano, doing dance and sports, and attend Ninja Warrior at the Ninja Playground. My kids get to choose their electives and extracurricular activities. I want them to be responsible for their education. I act as a guide. I present them with the classes and extracurricular activities that are available. I make sure that they're making wise choices and point them in a better direction if they are not. I also make sure they don't overwhelm themselves by taking on too much. Compromises are made as we prepare for the new year. I've learned that my children do much better when they know they are in charge of their education. They are more excited about their classes, which makes it easier for them to enjoy them. Learning also doesn't stop when the lessons do. As I was writing this down, my 6-year-old came to me and told me about how the sun and moon go around the earth. I was able in that moment to teach him a little bit of science. We played with our fingers to show the motion of the moon orbiting the earth while the earth circled around the sun. It lasted less than 5 minutes, but he learned something. Find those moments and cherish them. It takes patience and awareness. You won't be able to steal away every time a teaching moment arises, but do it as often as you can. Just remember that learning doesn't have to happen in the morning during classes. It can be at any time of day. I'm very fortunate that my job teaching dance is in the evening. I'm able to homeschool in the early to mid part of the day and take care of other responsibilities before I leave for my classes. But if you work during the day, you can switch it. No one ever said that school had to be done in the morning. It's nice, but not necessary. If you're in a position where you are unable to teach your children in the morning, your homeschool day will just look different than others. And guess what? No one's homeschool day looks the same anyway. Gosh, sometimes my homeschool days look different day to day. We have a routine, but honestly, sometimes that routine is not followed at all. Sometimes mom needs a break, or the kids need a break, or something else comes up that needs attention. It's okay, and my kids will not fall behind, and neither will yours. I want to instill in all of you that you are not only capable of teaching your child, but you are one of their best teachers. You are their mother or father. You are their first teacher. You know your children. You are the most qualified to teach them because they are your children. Start, and your confidence will grow as you continue. Some days will be hard, and some will be heaven sent. Some days it's like pulling teeth to get my sons to sit down and do their work. Tears have been shed by all parties. Other days, it's the most wonderful thing in the world. There are two best moments of teaching. The first is when your student finally understands a concept that has been eluding them. Their eyes light up, their smile spreads across their face, their excitement is palpable, and you give a sigh of relief and revel in their joy. The other moment is when that same student teaches that same concept to someone else, to another student. Then you know for sure they understand. You watch as they experience that moment of their pupil gaining the understanding. They look at you with a knowing and thankful look in their eye. The only thing that can make those moments better is when that student is your own. Show your children that education is important. Show them that you know they are capable of great things. Believe in them. Believe in yourself. Do not try to mimic public school at home. Instead, find your own routine. Be flexible. Be forgiving. Be strong. Be patient. And be kind. Find friends to lean on during the hard times, because just like everything else that is worthwhile, homeschooling is hard, but so very rewarding.
So, when our first child was born, we talked about homeschooling and we tossed the idea around often. But I had no idea how to homeschool. So, when it was time for kindergarten, we enrolled her in our local public school. On her first day of school, I was physically sick with worry about how it would go. They had wanted her to do all-day preschool, but there was no way I was going to put her through that. She loved school. Being the only extrovert in our family, school was fantastic for her social needs, but educationally, it was a joke. She was given so much homework that I spent hours with her after school working on it. Then at parent-teacher conferences, they insisted she should be reading in kindergarten. The final straw was her reaction to test days. I always knew when she'd been through a round of standardized testing, because she would come home and scream at me for the rest of the day. The test stressed her out terribly, and I couldn't get anyone to warn me when they were coming so that we could prepare for them. So when it came time to decide whether to homeschool or not, my logic went like this. If I was already spending so much time with her after school, I could certainly spend that time with her homeschooling. And I wasn't sold on the idea that she should be reading in kindergarten anyway. Finally, I knew that there were always going to be hard days, but I wanted to spend as much time with her so that I could experience the good times as well as the hard times. I did some research and found out how to file an affidavit and pulled her out of kindergarten with 1 month left in the school year. I didn't realize that I also needed to unenroll her from the school, but I figured that out and we worked it out. The rest of her kindergarten year was spent coloring and doing random projects I found on Pinterest. When first grade started, I still had no idea how to homeschool. I was very pregnant with our 4th child, and I had started taking online classes to finish my degree. So I went to Barnes & Noble and bought a bunch of flashcards and workbooks, and we did those. She didn't learn to read, but she learned enough math to stay on grade level. That year, we spent most of our time enjoying our new baby. She learned all the ins and outs of loving and caring for a baby, and she's excellent at taking care of young children to this day. A neighbor introduced me to homeschool Facebook groups, and I began to learn about the different curricula and methods. I picked out the math and language arts curriculum for my 2nd grader and found things for our preschooler. Then in the summer between her 1st and 2nd grade year, I returned to the University of Utah as a full-time student. While I was going to school, our nanny helped out with homeschooling, but I eventually realized that I just wanted to do it myself. We quickly ran through 1st grade math again to catch anything that we'd missed, which was a lot. And then we quickly ran through 2nd grade math. She still couldn't read, but science and history were really fun. When we studied solar eclipses when my husband brought them up to the University of Utah so that we could watch the solar eclipse together. And we studied the Native Americans of Utah when we would travel around southern Utah for my degree. My education inspired their education. I graduated at the end of my daughter's 2nd grade year, and a month later found Brooke on one of the homeschool Facebook groups. I had never considered the idea of a co-op, but it would fulfill my daughter's need for social learning and help me to get on a better schedule. So after months of asking Brooke a million questions, we joined Cliff Rose Academy, and it has been fantastic. My life is consumed by homeschooling, but I love it. My favorite topic to teach is history. And one of the greatest things I've learned about homeschooling is that it gives the parents a chance to review everything they forgot or never learned from elementary school and on. I know now why PH makes an F sound. It's Greek. And I know that that's not far-fetched for the English language because we studied in history how English was developed from 7 other languages. My oldest has learned to read. I have more kids to teach as they grow up and become ready for formal learning. And people ask me all the time if I'm going to keep homeschooling them through high school. I know that I love it enough to do it, but we'll see what happens. The best part about homeschooling is the freedom you have to adjust when something isn't working. We are road schoolers, with the goal to one day become world schoolers. Our road schooling adventure started before my daughter ever went to kindergarten. One day, the app I'd been following that predicted the aurora borealis said that it would come as low as Idaho. So we hopped in the car with our 3 kids and drove to Idaho. We got a hotel in Pocatello and then kept driving up I-15 to see if we could get lucky. We didn't. We never saw it that night. But we decided that since we were so close, we may as well go to Yellowstone. We explored for a day, stayed the night in Montana, and then explored for another day. Then we went home through the Tetons and Jackson, Wyoming, and eventually into Idaho. We found a man-made geyser in Soda Springs. We've made many trips like that since. We get the National Parks Pass every year and have been to all of Utah's national parks and many of the surrounding states' national parks. Our kids are well trained in driving long distances in the car. We have learned that they are exceptionally whiny on the first day of adventuring, but that they mellow out and enjoy the trip for the rest of the time. This year, we had planned a 2-week-long trip over the 4th of July to Washington, D.C. Obviously, that didn't happen. And thankfully, I hadn't booked anything before COVID hit, but it would have looked like this. We were going to drive to Denver, spend the night, and then go to church in the morning. Next, we go to Topeka, Kansas, and learn about Brown versus Board of Education. Then we drive to Indianapolis, and then to Pittsburgh. We were going to spend 2 days in Pittsburgh exploring, and then drive to Washington, D.C., and spend 4 days exploring. On our way home, we would stop in Columbus, Ohio, and then St. Louis, Missouri. We were going to spend a day in St. Louis exploring, and then we'd head home the way that we came. We planned to learn a lot about our country's history, and I was so excited to see the Mississippi River. Maybe one day we'll get a chance to take that trip, but COVID allowed us to save big time for our world schooling adventure. We've been planning to start in Japan, but we might change that to Canada, depending on the state of things after COVID calms down. If we do make it to Japan, I can't wait to see if my kids can learn Japanese. And I'm really excited to see how much of the culture they absorb. Our daily schedule revolves heavily around our chore chart. This helps us to keep the house clean when we are at home, or to keep the hotel organized when we were out on an adventure. It also is an excellent reminder for me to do some school with my kids, no matter what, because it is one of their chores. Sometimes school is reading from the history book. Other times it's walking around the lower geyser basin of Yellowstone and watching geysers go off and mud pots boil. Usually the day after an experience, we research things like, what is a geyser? When I first started homeschooling, I decided that one of the things I wanted my kids to know how to do was to take care of a house and to not be constantly sucked into electronics. It took a few years, but eventually we settled on the chore chart that we've got now. And the rewards for finishing every day are $1 and electronic time. It's taken a long time to train them on what I expect them to do and how to do their chores. But they're starting to understand that they can't get away with being a drain on the family. They must contribute. We pay our kids when they finish all their daily chores so that they can learn how to manage money and all the ins and outs of that, like talking to a cashier, saving for a big purchase, borrowing money, and then paying it back. We also expect them to do unpaid chores, but these are not daily requirements. We do school at any time of the day, and I've learned to embrace the flexibility because I can get my kids when I'm ready for them, and they can come to me when they're ready. I do actually have one kid who will grab his backpack and drag it into my room and make me do school with him so he can finish his chores. I wish the others would be as proactive, but I haven't figured out what motivates them yet, so they don't. In the past, I've taken a very traditional approach to our schedule, where I try to plan for doing specific topics on certain days. But sometimes that means that we don't spend enough time on the topics towards the end of the week because we're too tired. So this year I'm implementing a looping schedule. We'll be doing our regularly scheduled things like art class and co-op, but then we'll loop through things like typing, construction, art homework, nature walks, and anything that comes from the co-op. This year, our loop days will be on Monday and Friday. A loop might look something like this. On Monday, we might get through typing and construction before the kids are spent and I can't handle their whining anymore. Then on Friday, we'll do some art homework. That might be all we have energy for in the week. So the next week we'll start on Monday with a nature walk and extra co-op work. And maybe we'll have so much energy that we get in some typing. Then on Friday, we do some of our construction class. With a loop schedule, you just do the next topic on your loop list. regardless of what day it is. This way, you can get to all the topics you want to without missing one, because you were dead to the world on a particular day. Still, pace yourself. You don't want to have so many things on your loop that there are weeks between each time you study a topic. And then, of course, we're going to have days and weeks where this schedule is tossed entirely out the window in favor of experience-based learning. We do what we want, we learn what we want, and we do it our way.
I'm the second of 3 daughters, and I was born in Sweden, outside Stockholm. My older sister made a school for me and my younger sister and taught us what she learned at school: cursive writing, knitting, crocheting, painting with watercolors, etc. Later on, she practiced her homework with me, and I picked up a thing or two of high school science from these sessions. My mother is American and my father is Swedish. So we grew up with one set of grandparents speaking English and the other grandparents speaking Swedish. I never felt quite at home in Sweden and went to Germany in 2002, and a few months later I moved to Provo, Utah to go to Brigham Young University. I had a variety of school experiences growing up. First, I had already learned how to read and write before starting school, and I was really bored in the first years. I also was bilingual, more or less, and was frustrated that nobody seemed to care much that the education that they were offering fit what I needed to learn. Secondly, there was the difficulty of social relationships. I struggled to make friends because I had a hard time understanding how to do it. I was bullied in 7th grade and really suffered from the insensitive responses from the adults who should have protected me. Third, in 10th grade, I really loved school, and I was in a school which had a fantastic music program, and I studied with kids who were also passionate about music, and they were quite talented. It was fulfilling for me to go to school those 3 years, 10th through 12th. Meanwhile, my aunt in the US was homeschooling my cousins. I remember attending a homeschool co-op once with them. I think I must have been in college then, as I'm about 14 years older than these cousins, where kids were presenting stuff that they had learned. I got married to Daniel while still in college, and we had our first child in October 2006. I asked our neighbor, who had a 3-year-old daughter and a baby just a few months older than ours, if her daughter went to preschool. Her response was, "No, I'm homeschooling her." I had been so focused on my own life for so long that I hadn't really thought much about how I would raise my own children. Her comment brought on the next phase in my life. I went to the library and I found a shelf with homeschool topics, and I checked out all the books that piqued my interest. It was a sizable stack. Would I pursue this? I was quickly persuaded that this was a great option. It rang true to me that I should be able to figure out how to educate my own children, especially considering how many negative experiences I had had in my own school. I figured I could do better than that for my own children. If my sister could teach me more effectively than school, who was just a few years older than me, I knew that school was not necessary to learn. In 2007, we moved back to Sweden before our daughter turned 1, and I connected with homeschoolers in Sweden over the internet since they were few and far between. In 2008, we went to a homeschooling camp in northern Sweden and met these brave pioneers. Their happy stories convinced me that I wanted to have this for my family as well. Incidentally, several of them were also home birthers, and I have ended up giving birth at home 4 times since meeting them. In 2010, there was a change in the Swedish school law. The politicians decided that homeschooling should only be permitted if you could meet these 3 requisites. 1, provide an equivalent alternative education. 2, permit insight from the government. And 3, present exceptional circumstances. This 3rd requisite made it virtually impossible to receive permission to homeschool for philosophical or religious reasons, and this was the purpose of the new wording. I got involved politically with a party that aligned closest to my views. The politics in Sweden are more diverse in some ways than here in the US. There are 8 parties in our parliament, but they are also more similar than here in that most of them subscribe to a large state. The party I chose was one of maybe 2 that talked about limiting government to let people live their own lives the way they want. I tried to lobby within the party to push for changing the school law, but I did not persuade very many people. For many, it was such a small issue, as only very few people were interested in homeschooling, and therefore these people were frequently viewed with suspicion and prejudice. It was risky for politicians to stick out their neck for these people, even though the cause was just. In 2012, our daughter started kindergarten in Sweden. It was not compulsory at the time, but we wanted to get to know people in our new town. We had moved there less than a year before, and we could keep her home anytime we wanted without repercussions. She had a lovely teacher, and they also had an assistant, and it was a small village school with 5 to 6 children in her class. In the fall of 2012, I attended the Global Home Education Conference in Berlin, Germany. There were some very compelling presentations there, and especially the Berlin Declaration made a deep impression on me. That is a compilation of a number of different international treaties which uphold the right to homeschool. Everything changed in 2013. We had our third child in March, and because we had an unassisted home birth, which was frowned upon by some, we knew we were starting to be too different to fit in. We planned a 3-month trip to the US to visit family and try the unschooling approach. We were going to leave right as school was starting up, as this was a good time to travel. The school was a mess. They had not decided who was going to teach first grade yet, even in midsummer. Somehow, the principal caught wind that we were planning a long trip, and he called me. He told me that I had to apply for leave from school to be able to go. I told him plainly that he couldn't legally stop us from going, but if he insisted, I would fill out his form. I went to the school, filled out the form, and leave was not granted. Instead, he reported us to the social services, which I didn't know until we came back home. We left anyway. We had such a lovely time traveling together as a family, hiking, visiting relatives, etc. So when we returned, and our daughter returned to school, I got a phone call from the social services, and they decided to trash this report since it was unfounded now that she was in school again. But I didn't dare keep her home for any other unexcused absence after that. The local politicians had decided that fall that they were going to close our village school and send all the village kids to the town by bus. Our daughter was doing well in first grade, despite having missed the first 3 months of it. We were unhappy with the decision to move all the kids, and I sat down with a new principal and explained that we wanted to homeschool instead. She said plainly, "We're not going to have any homeschool." She totally did not understand what homeschool was like. She thought it was that they needed to provide a teacher to come to our home. And of course, this was not the case, as I explained to her, but she was not open to the idea. She did, however, agree to move our daughter to second grade, since she was doing well academically. Shortly after this decision was made, we submitted a formal application to homeschool. We explained that as a bilingual family, we wanted to give our daughter an education that mirrored her heritage. This was our exceptional circumstances that we claimed under the school law. This application was denied by the local education and school board. We appealed to the local administrative court, and we were also denied there. At this point, we joined HSLDA, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and received help from Mike Donnelly in forming our appeal to the appeals court. He helped us craft an appeal that showed we had a right to homeschool under multiple international treaties that Sweden had ratified. It was like the appeals court didn't even read our application, but they denied it. They did not specify why, except citing another court case where a family who was Jewish did not have the right to homeschool either. A final effort was made in writing to the Supreme Administrative Court, together with the HSLDA. The first part of our appeal was the appeal to hear our case, and the second was our argument why they should grant it to us. They did not hear our case. This was in February of 2015. We had been arguing for the court system for just over a year and had reached the end of the road. Meanwhile, our eldest daughter was going to school. We knew that our daughter, who was a couple years younger, had autistic tendencies. I had contact with many parents who had autistic kids, and these children generally had a hard time with school. We would not submit to putting her in school. She would start kindergarten in 2015 or first grade in 2016 in Sweden, as they still hadn't made kindergarten mandatory. They did a couple years later. That summer I became pregnant with our fourth child. We were faced with a decision to either move before or after the baby arrived. We prayed about it in earnest, not knowing which would be better. In July, I got a text message from the previous owners of the house we had bought, asking if we were thinking of selling the house. Everything fell into place, and we sold it to their son in October 2015, and we moved with just 8 suitcases and carry-ons, selling or giving away most of what we owned. We settled in Springville in November 2015 after having stayed with family for a month to get our bearings. I was blown away by how easy it was to homeschool in Utah. I remember going to the school district office in Spanish Fork and signing some paperwork. No reports required, no annual application, no exceptional circumstances, no permission granted or denied. I loved it. We enrolled our daughters in some dance classes and went to the library to learn about whatever we desired. There was one other homeschooling family in our neighborhood, and we got together to do arts and crafts at one point, and I talked with her about curriculum at some point. We liked how we could do whatever we wanted. We moved to Pleasant Grove in 2017 and got into figure skating. Our eldest got into theater as well. Our second daughter decided after a year that she wasn't interested in competing in figure skating and started climbing instead. In 2018, we signed up for MyTech High and did that for our 3 oldest kids. Our oldest really wanted to go to school, and she decided to go to a charter school last year. However, online school was difficult, and she decided to direct her own education this coming year. We joined the co-op Cliff Rose Academy a year ago, and it has been a lot of fun, especially for our son, to connect with some other kids. So I'm going to tell you about an ideal day in my life, and I like to get up early in the morning, and as I mentioned, I like playing the viola, so sometimes I'll do that, and sometimes I'll go to the ice rink and go ice skating. And when I come back, I'm refreshed and happy, and I enjoy being with my kids. I go over any needs that people have of being driven places, as one of my jobs is chauffeuring them around. Any lessons we've got scheduled, any errands that need to be run, and we try to coordinate them. I ask them, anybody wanting to go climb today? Anybody wanting to go ice skating, seeing friends, any other field trips we want to do? This is important as 2 of our kids have autism diagnoses, and it is crucial to them that we don't plan too many activities, and that the things they want to do are honored. Sometimes the response is that everybody wants to just stay home. Sometimes it involves hiring one of my girls to babysit while I go ice skating with the boys, etc. I try to plan for what we're going to eat and would get that going. We aim for at least 1 formal meal together as a family per day, and other than that, we let people help themselves to leftovers or cook something, or just make themselves a sandwich. If the kids want to play games, which they often do, I ask if they have done their chores. They will usually spend some time cleaning up if they haven't. Or I might ask them if they want to do a learning activity together. My son often will ask to read a chapter of history together. My daughters don't usually want to have much help with anything. Sometimes I will set up art supplies at our crafts table. Our second daughter is into 3D animation and will often go and work on a project on her computer. Our eldest will often come up with projects and is very good at organizing, so she has helped organize our kitchen. We all love reading, so this is something we do for leisure, and we also like learning about the world, so we will often have discussions of economics or current events during our family meal. On occasion, there is an engineering problem and presented in a house project, and my husband will usually spearhead a discussion of concepts needed to understand how to solve it. Usually in the evening, we read scriptures together, which often spawns a discussion about how what we read applies to current events. Sometimes we spend some time studying or watching a video right before going to sleep. There's no pressure, no time crunch, just a little joy of learning right before going to bed. We basically try to live our lives as if school doesn't exist. When it is time to write our learning logs at the end of the week, I have just asked them what they have been doing, and then we write it down.
Hi. So, my husband and I met at BYU. working together on campus, flipping burgers, which was lots of fun. We still work really well together. We were married in 2003, and we've since had 11 children, and I did give birth to all of them. Shortly after we were married in 2003, my homeschool district back in Oregon canceled the last 2 weeks of school due to budget cuts. At the time, I had a conversation with my mother, and she expressed frustration with the school for not living up to her expectations. And she told me that she wished that she had taken some child development classes so that she could supplement the education of my siblings. And at that time, I was at BYU. I had just finished my sophomore year, and I had lots of classes to take. I was a business finance major, and I had my schedule all planned out, but there were a few electives that I needed to take. And I thought, well, while I'm here, I should just take some electives with child development, and that will help someday. Hopefully that would help my future children if I have to educate them or supplement their education or something like that. So I looked into child development classes, and they excited me so much that I ended up changing my major, and I got my bachelor's degree in marriage, family, and human development. And I focused a lot on child development and on family finance. During this bachelor's degree, my mother-in-law, who still had 2 young sons at home, decided to homeschool my 2 youngest brothers-in-law. And she did this off and on for several years and put them in different charter schools and other things. But we had a lot of good conversations during that time. And what I was learning in my bachelor's degree, along with the discussions I was having with my mother-in-law, led me to consider homeschooling as a possibility for my children. In fact, at one point we decided that we would homeschool for sure, kindergarten, first and second grade. And then after that point, I felt I would let my children decide where they wanted to attend school. My oldest child was born in 2005, and my second child was born in 2006. Towards the end of 2006, my children were about 18 months and 6 months old. I had a discussion with another mom, and she mentioned that she was going to start a group for people interested in homeschooling. So we ended up joining this group, and it was mostly a play group. We met about twice a week at parks or at people's homes, and we just let our children play. Most of the moms only had very young children. A couple of them had 4 or 5-year-olds, but most of us were just 1, 2, or 3-year-olds. And we let our children play together, and the moms sat and talked about homeschooling. And we talked about articles that we had been reading, books we had been reading, and we had lots of different discussions about philosophies and different things like that. The group met for several years. We had to leave the group at one point to go do an internship in Oregon, but then we came back and continued with that group until the moms in the group started feeling that our playgroup was distracting them from actually homeschooling. And at this point, those who had 4 and 5-year-olds, their children were now 8 and 9, and they felt like they needed more structure and more consistency, and that our playgroups were disrupting that. So that group disbanded as a biweekly play group in around 2010. And at this time, my husband finished his bachelor's degree, and we moved away again. We moved to Oregon, and at that point we had 5 children, and our oldest was getting ready to start kindergarten. So we had now been talking about homeschooling for several years, and we were very what we thought we were very experienced and well prepared to school. So we planned a classical curriculum and more of a traditional school at home approach. And so for my daughter's kindergarten year, we had just barely moved to Oregon, and we had a classical curriculum all laid out. We had planned everything. I had lists of when we were going to teach different subjects and what activities we would do each day and each week, and even lists of what materials I needed to purchase each week so I could be prepared. I burned out very quickly. Less than 6 weeks, I was completely burned out. And then we ended up moving 3 more times during that school year. We had moved to Oregon as my husband was finishing his master's degree for an internship. And then we had to move back to Utah to complete the thesis, and then back to Oregon again. And we ended up purchasing a home in Oregon when he finished his master's thesis. So during a 13-month period, which was my daughter's kindergarten year, we moved 4 times with 5 children, and had our 6th child shortly after that. When we moved back to Oregon the last time, the first week we were there, I met a friend and a neighbor who was a fellow homeschooler. She invited me to check out their Thomas Jefferson Education Commonwealth in Oregon. We attended their first day in September, and we fell in love with the group. It was exactly what we felt we needed. It was similar to the support group that we had left behind in Utah, except that it was there were children of all ages, and we especially loved seeing the youth in that group and seeing what they had become already at such a young age. There was one girl in particular that I asked to babysit multiple times. By this time I had 7 children, and we asked her to babysit a couple different times, and I was totally comfortable with her watching all of my children. And then at one point I asked her if she was excited for a specific dance that was coming up. And she told me, "Oh, I can't go to that dance. I'm not 14 yet." And I had no idea. I thought she was 15 or 16 because she acted like it. She was just so mature for her age. And we absolutely loved that group. And we felt that that was the place that we needed to be. So we stayed with that group for about 3 years. And I really appreciated all of the support and the mentoring that I received there from the other moms, and the experience that they shared with me. But at the same time, I did not consider myself to be a TJ Eder or a Thomas Jefferson Education follower. We continued to try out other homeschooling methods. Classical hadn't worked out all that great for us, but we tried Charlotte Mason. We did work boxes and unit studies, and we became very eclectic. And when my oldest hit that 3rd grade point that I had decided I would let her choose, I didn't let her choose because we loved our Commonwealth so much, and we didn't want her to miss out on the Commonwealth. So we continued homeschooling. In 2014, we moved to Layton, Utah, and found a new Commonwealth that had been started there and joined. And we were there for 2 years. At that point, I was dealing with some postpartum depression after my 8th child, and we shifted to more of an unschooling approach because it was really difficult to keep up with any other style that we had worked with before. Then in 2016, we moved to Orem, Utah, and we helped to found Inspired Minds Academy, which is another leadership education commonwealth. We are currently preparing to start our 5th year with Inspired Minds, and we have loved the community that we have helped to develop over the years. Our children don't want to attend public school because they would miss their friends at IMA. And the longer that we've homeschooled, the more that our eclectic style has matched up with and aligned with leadership education, or TJ Ed. So I now strongly recommend leadership education for anyone because we have found so many true principles in it, and it has proved sustainable for our family. So a typical day in the life for us has changed so much over the years. Our classical education time was very strict and rigid, but it didn't last very long because we couldn't sustain it. We had unit study and workbox times that we also couldn't sustain. And I can't even remember all of the routines. I asked my oldest the other day, and she told me that she remembers a lot of the different schedules, but neither of us can really remember all of them because we did almost no schedule lasted longer than a month or maybe 6 weeks if we were lucky. However, we do have routines that are pretty consistent, and there are a few principles that we work with each day. We keep meal times as our anchor points for the day, and we do chores around those meal times and anchor points so that we make sure everything happens. And then we shift our focus to different, we shift our focus between meals, basically. So we get up and we get ready for the day. And I know a lot of homeschoolers like to do school in their pajamas, and sometimes that's fun, but it doesn't work long term. We all do our best work when we are ready and prepared for the day. Then we have our circle time. Our circle time is what we call our morning devotional. And during that time, we pray as a family, we read, we discuss scriptures, we recite the Pledge of Allegiance, and we recite our personal family mission statement. And we read a Spanish book. My husband wants our children to learn Spanish, and so he is available during our circle time. And so we read some books in Spanish and we practice our vocabulary and other things like that. And it's lots of fun. After our circle time, we have breakfast and we clean it up. As part of our cleanup, we also move laundry and load the dishwasher. Because we have a large family, we do 3 loads of laundry every day and 3 loads in the dishwasher every day. After our breakfast and our cleanup time, we have our morning learning time. And this is the part that has changed the most over the years. But generally, mornings are for academics. We do online math now. We use a curriculum called CTC Math that's all online. And so our children get some set time to work on their math. I teach language arts in small groups or one-on-one, depending on the age and level of the student. And there's lots of independent reading going on, and our little ones play a lot. And we have lots of learning toys and building toys and things that they get to do. One fun thing that we do at the end of our morning time occasionally is to get on YouTube and watch a video of something that interests us. We have watched lots of video, like history documentaries or science videos. There's so many fun YouTube channels out there right now that can teach lots of fun concepts. So we do documentaries, we do science lesson videos. We've learned how to do line dancing and watch video tutorials on different line dances and learn to do them. We have, I can't even think of all of them. Oh, we love watching videos that have songs where we learn academic facts. There's a really fun one of learning how to multiply and another one that's learning how to do long division that is all put to music. And so we like to watch those. And sometimes we watch them over again because kids ask for them. And sometimes we just browse and find something fun to watch. Lunch and lunch cleanup, we try to have happen at the same time every day. And the reason for this is sometimes our morning routine is a little slow. Sometimes we are late, or we're cranky, or it takes too long to clean up breakfast or whatever, and our morning learning time gets shortened. But if we have had a rough morning, then we are all cranky and we're not really learning because we're not really focusing on the learning. So we need to end at lunchtime so that we can move past that cranky points, and we know that we have an end time. And if we had a really great morning and we got everything done early and we got started with our learning time early, then we've just spent several hours doing some great learning time. And so it's a good time to stop. We don't need to continue learning just because there are still things to learn. There will always be things to learn. So we end our morning learning time for lunch at a consistent time every day. And we do our lunch cleanup, which is similar to breakfast cleanup, where we clean up the kitchen, we clean up everything we've been working on, and we move the laundry and do another load of dishes. In the afternoon, we do projects, errands, and other outside classes. So we have children taking drama classes and ballet classes and speech and debate classes and other things like that. We try to schedule our out-of-home classes for the afternoon, with the exception of our Commonwealth. That is an all-day thing. And on that day, our morning learning time is just part of Commonwealth. I will drop kids off for their classes, and I will run errands during their class time. And I've worked out carpools with different moms so that if I do a drop off one day, they will do the pickup. And so while the kids are in class, I can go run errands and do grocery shopping and those kinds of things. We try to schedule at least one home day every week. And on a home day, we don't have any classes scheduled, and I don't run any errands. And home days are for projects. And I will do home projects around the house. I will play with my spreadsheets on a computer somewhere, and my kids can do whatever projects they want to do. And this is when they paint or bake or build things in the garage. It's also the time that I do my finances, and I call my sisters and talk with them. And it's when we do any meal prep for the whole week. Like we can brown all of our ground beef in one sitting. We can chop all of our vegetables, those kinds of things. After our project or errand or class time, we have dinner, which usually starts with a house cleanup and then ends with a house cleanup. We try to eat as a family, but it doesn't always happen. Sometimes there are classes or other activities or meetings or events that children have to go to or adults have to go to. And the Instant Pot has been one of our best friends on busy errand days for sure. And then in the evenings are time for games and read aloud and other entertainment. When we have time in the evenings, when people are home, we like to play games as a family, or just a portion of the family, because sometimes we have too many people for the games. Then after we pick up the house for the day, after our dinner cleanup, we'll sit down and we can watch an episode of something as a family. We try to reserve entertainment screens for whole family time. Then when everyone is in pajamas at bedtime, we say a prayer in the hallway, and then everyone gets in their beds, and my husband reads aloud from the hallway to all of the children. The older ones are allowed to stay up after that and read on their own if they wish. Usually they have flashlights so that they don't keep little ones awake. And then the youngest ones are usually asleep by the time my husband finishes reading, but not always. And if they're not, they still have to stay in bed after that. So our entire day is learning. It has become a lifestyle rather than a checklist thing. And we have loved our lifestyle of learning.
So thanks for listening to our stories. We were really excited to share them with you, and I was really excited to hear everyone else's story. We're going to take a break now and come back at 11 to talk about curriculum. And while we're talking about curriculum, if there's any questions you have about the curriculum we're going over, or about maybe what you could do with your curriculum, feel free to put that in the chat. We would love to answer those questions for you. So we're back to talk about curriculum, and we're going to start off with a few books that Eleanor wants to recommend.
So I've read maybe 10 or 20 homeschooling books. This is one of my favorites, and it's in German. It's originally in French. It's called Und ich war nie in der Schule, which means I never went to school. And I never went to school. It's by Andre Stern, and he gave a presentation at this conference in Berlin that I mentioned in my earlier presentation. And I will also talk more about what he said later on this afternoon. The subtitle is Geschichte eines glücklichen Kindes, which is the story of a happy child. There's many books, and I have written reviews of some other ones that weren't put into the papers they've gotten, but I will post them later on so you can see them on Facebook. As we are pretty flexible with what kind of learning materials we use, this is one of the books we use for our science. It's got a lot of beautiful photographs in it, and I like studying this one with my 4-year-old, even though it's pretty advanced material. He is very much into learning about whatever I'm studying, so when I'm studying this book, he wants to study it too. So I guess that's what curriculum is for our family. It's often something that one of the parents decides to study, and then the kids come along for the ride.
I'll start with Saxon math. Saxon uses a spiral method that... I'll start with Saxon math. Saxon uses a spiral method, which means it will circle back and go over topics and concepts the children have learned previously. I really like Saxon math because the spiral method makes sure the children know the concept through repetition. Children do fantastic when repetition is used. However, I like to modify it so my kids are not spending so much time on the practice problems. They could easily spend an hour to an hour and a half on just math if we did everything that Saxon asked of us. Story of the World is a fun way to learn history. It uses the classical method. You read about the history from the smaller book. The larger contains activities, coloring pages, crafts, recommended books, etc. I like to let my kids color the coloring pages while I read, and then we read an excerpt from the activity book. Then we do one of the activities. The Good and the Beautiful History is a great curriculum. It wasn't a really good fit for my children, so I didn't use it for the complete year. We only used it for a couple months. But it has beautiful pictures, it has a story that you read or that you can actually listen to. And it also has a game that you can play, which is a lot of fun. Handwriting Without Tears. This is a new curriculum for me. We just got it this year. I'm so excited to try it out. But I have heard such good things about it. A Reason for Science. This is probably my favorite science program. The activity pages go along with the lessons and are so much fun. It does, as it progresses and gets into the higher levels, it does ask a lot of writing. So what we would do is we would just talk about the questions rather than write about it in the student pages. The experiments are a lot of fun, and they're very well developed and are age appropriate. Life of Fred Elementary Series. This is a new one, again, for our family, and we're really excited to use it as supplementary. It is particularly for math, but as you're reading through it, you are getting other subjects. It pulls in some science, it pulls in some history. Since you're reading, you're getting some language arts in there. And so it's a really nice, rounded program, but it still is focused on math. We Live Together is a social studies curriculum. This is actually a curriculum that is and was used in public schools. They have an activity book that goes along with the textbook. It was just enough information for a child in elementary school to learn something, but not be overwhelmed with the information. Other textbooks that are in this curriculum are People and Places, Our Communities, and Our Country's Regions. When teaching art, I really enjoyed this next book. It's How to Teach Art to Children. We had a lot of fun with it. It was very easy to understand and use. The kids had a lot of fun with the projects. Healthy Living from the Start is a great textbook. It goes over many of the different aspects of health. It also has levels within the text for students that are different ages. So you're able to teach children that are varied in age from the same textbook. In His Image is another one that I just recently got. We're so very excited about this one. It's a unit studies curriculum. And so, but it's based on the LDS perspective. And I'm so very excited to try it out. And the last one on my list that I'm sharing is the Tuttle Twins. My 9-year-old has absolutely loved these books. They're stories that follow a set of twins through their adventures. They learn about economics through their adventure or during their adventures. These next few are recommendations from Caitlin, and so I'll read you what she has to say about each one of them. The first one is the Spell to Read to Write. As the name suggests, this curriculum builds a child's spelling and phonetic skills explicitly, which cultivate writing and reading. It was this explicit instruction I was seeking for my child and myself. This is a seriously heavy curriculum. You'll become a master of the English language. To increase approachability, these two books hold instruction from preschool through college level spelling. The black book holds the spelling words, and the daunting red book has instructions for the many phases included in such a spread. They have online free trainings, making this wonderful information even more friendly. Very supportive company. I love this detailed and flexible tool. Now that I've mastered it, I find I use their methods in everything. This is the Singapore Math Standards Edition and the Essential Math. The Standards Edition was made for a rigorous U.S. market. 2B refers to the second half of the second grade. There is a consumable workbook that accompanies that we will likely get. We did not use any workbooks for first grade because I felt more table work wasn't helpful for kids during that time. This manual is the perfect balance of information and conciseness for me. They include supportive games and manipulative introduction for topics. The textbook is in color, and we have read it like a book in first grade. Similar to the Standards Edition, this includes informative, concise direction for me, the teacher. Even more exciting is this instruction is included in a few lines on the bottom of each page. I love being able to rip out the page, then find the child, and use some of our spare doubloons if nothing else is handy to teach math. Myquan Math. Hands-on awesomeness. 6 lab sheet books cover roughly first to third grade material. These are built to be used with Cuisinart rods. I'm going to start this one over. Myquan Math. Hands-on awesomeness. 6 lab sheet books cover roughly first through third grade material. These are built to be used with Cuisinart rods. I love the dramatically different approach. When we get stuck, I usually pull these out to supplement our other math lessons, built to be easily expanded or contracted to fit the child. First language lessons. These have a similar using experience to the Story of the World. They're actually from the same company. Flipping through the workbook, I am seeing diagramming parts of speech and dictionary activities. This series pulls passages from uplifting classical literature. Explore creation. This book and the others in its series have the best experiments. The text is written to the child and is very detailed, informative, while also being playful. Lots of pictures. I really appreciate that these do not teach my kids that humans are evil. Very solid science from a Christian perspective. The zoology coloring book. Again, a whole series, including a geography one. Very detailed, labeled panels to color. Colored pencils work best, with detailed descriptions on the facing page. She also suggests Science Through the Ages, which was a hand-me-down book that she loves to reference.
Okay, guys. So I'm going to add a little bit to what Brooke was talking about. You want to get on screen? Okay. And Emily is too. I'm going to start with Saxon because that's what we use. The reason I chose Saxon is because it's what I used when I was in elementary school, so I was super familiar with it. And that's one thing I'd like to kind of add to all of this is you as a parent need to do what works for you, not just what works for your child. It's got to go both ways. We also modify Saxon heavily because they literally add everything you could ever possibly want to do in a classroom for the public school where there's 30 students. But when you only have one child, you can do like 2 or 3 lessons in a day in like 30 minutes if you just cut it down to the lesson portion. Do you have anything to say about Saxon? Okay. So then I'm going to go on to Story of the World. Not yet. Sorry. I'm going to go on to Story of the World because I'm the history teacher in our co-op, and I had no idea that Story of the World existed until Brooke introduced me to it, and I love it. I absolutely love Story of the World. There's so many components to it. If I was doing it by myself, not in a co-op, I would just read the books. There's like these storybooks that explain the story from start of the world till now. There's 4 of them. And we usually read them for our bedtime story. The kids love it. They love spending that one-on-one time with me. But because we do it with the co-op, in our time together as a group, we do stuff from the activity book. The activity books have questions that you can ask the kids. Most of the time I skip those. I'm kind of going to see if I can incorporate them this year, but if it ends up being too much, we will drop it. And then they've got other recommended books. Sometimes I use them. Most of the time I don't. They have map work so you can learn geography, which is fantastic. I really love that about it. And then so many activities, you just pick one and go for it. Or pick 2, but really, most people don't need any of that. Just read the book that goes along with it.
We have all the Story of the World books also. I have never actually read them to my children. They're just books that we have on the shelf, and my children have picked them up and read them, or read portions of them at least in different chapters. And sometimes we will, we have pulled out a chapter or 2 just as we're studying something else, and we go, oh, I wonder if there's a story about this in Story of the World. And so we'll read a chapter or 2 from them. So that's how we've used them. Okay, so, we're going to swap here. Okay, so for going back to Life of Fred, we have used Life of Fred also, and we love Life of Fred. It's really, really fun, and it's silly and fun, and it's like you wouldn't, as you're reading through it, you're not quite sure, no one is quite sure that they're actually learning anything. And it feels just like a fun story time until later when you, after you've gone through them several times and you realize how much they're actually picking up. Even as an adult, I loved math as a kid. And as I mentioned earlier, I was a finance major. Math is kind of a strong point, but there are still things in Life of Fred that I'm picking up as I read through them. And we have We don't currently use them as our main math curriculum, but we still have them on the shelf, and people still pull them off just to read them and have fun with them.
I think we can get started on my pictures. Is that working? Okay. So this is Good and the Beautiful. A lot of times you won't actually see it like this. This is a physical copy, but you can get them in PDF. And you can either print it off or you can just leave it on your computer and do it that way. You can save on printing costs. And they offer language arts level 1 through 1 through 5 for free, right? Yeah. The PDFs. If you want the book, you got to go buy the book. And the book is nice, but it's not necessary. What else about it? It's pretty intense. Sometimes I don't want to do it, but I haven't figured out anything else, so this is what we do. Oh, this is the pre-K course. I do really enjoy this one. This is Good and the Beautiful Pre-K, and it's just a really good introduction to like all the letters and the sounds and stuff. When we do preschool in our house, it starts when they're about 4 with just writing and coloring and stuff like that. And then when they're around 5, we start this book. There's another book after it called The Primer, like the I can't remember what it's called, but it's the primer. But we've been through that too, and it's pretty good. And then it goes into kindergarten, and I don't like their kindergarten one, but I haven't found anything better yet. So it's what I do.
So really quickly, we have, I'll step over here. We have used the Good and the Beautiful off and on also, and I love it. I think that the kids, I think that they learn a lot. I think that the curriculum is, as Krista mentioned, it's really intense, but it's also really thorough. But my children did not like it at all, and it was a fight every day to get them to do it. And so we have moved on to other things because it wasn't working long term for our family. But I did. My 5-year-old does really still love the pre-K book, and so we're still doing that one with him.
Okay, so this is the Good and Beautiful Energy Science course. We haven't used it yet, but a lot of that comes down to Good and Beautiful is kind of just intense in general. They're kind of fun. They have like vocabulary for you to learn about the science or science words, and then there's like a lesson and you just read it. One of the fun things about Good and the Beautiful, the reason it's appealing to parents is because you just sit down and read it. And that is really kind of wonderful. Oh, the nature notebooks, they're so fun. Sorry, my picture's so blurry. They just have like fun stuff for you to fill in about, like, if you go on a nature walk, you can fill this in and like, what did you notice and what did you learn this day? They're just fun. Trifecta. This is one of our family favorite games. It's a game. It's really just a supplement to whatever math curriculum you buy. But this is the addition and subtraction. It teaches fact families. They also have multiplication and division. We have both. We play it all the time. My kids like to make up their own games around this game. It's a great one. Natural Speller is just a fun little book that was given to me by another mom who homeschooled and then decided to stop. But I like the way that it works because it takes like word families and you focus on that word family and really solidify it. So it's a good one for us. Oh, and the Smithsonian Maker books. Just so y'all know, Smithsonian makes so many of these books. They have history ones that I'm going to buy this year. I am Really, really excited about these. The maker books just have instructions for how to make all sorts of stuff. My 6-year-old son took, I think, the black one just the other day, opened it up and found like a boat to make, and he proceeded to make it. And then had to ask me like a million questions like, Mom, why is it sinking in the water? And I was like, well, I think it's because you didn't paint it. It was really fun. It's great for kids to just open and do, but we also use it in like a guided tech thing. Like if you're with my tech eye and you've got to do a tech class, we'll do these or other things, but we can get into those later. Teach your child to read in 100 easy lessons. I hate this book. It came highly recommended. It's the worst. Don't use it.
Okay, so this book, first of all, is a lot newer than the copy I used. But we actually used this Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons to teach my oldest 3 children how to read. And it was a fight constantly. But it is effective. And I know a lot of people who totally love it. In fact, I have a couple of sisters who use this to teach their children to read before they send them off to kindergarten. And it is effective. But I will also say that the method that is used in this book is there's also a computer version of it that is way more fun, called Funix, Funnix. And if you just go to their website, funix.com, it looks like super old-fashioned and way outdated, but their curriculum, their computer program that you download is actually really fun, and it has 120 lessons instead of 100, and it's more interactive, kind of. I mean, it's similar to like watching Blue's Clues, where there's like somebody's giving you, asking you questions and things, and you're expected to respond, but it's way more visual, and it really helped my visual learners. And it was fun because when we did it, we had our computer hooked up to our television, and my twins, who are now 11, learned how to read using the Funix program while they were literally hanging upside down on the couch just watching the TV. And so they can actually read upside down almost better than they can right side up, because that's how they learn to read. But that one's really fun too, because it has worksheets that go with it, and it basically becomes a full kindergarten curriculum in my mind, at least, for all that kindergartners need to have. But it is based on this Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons, and it's very similar, so it's a lot of fun.
Okay, so preschool skills, colors, and shapes. This is one that you can find at Barnes & Noble. It is one of the few that I got that first time going around that I actually kept, because you can see the company that makes it is Flash Kids. I love pretty much everything I've ever tried from them. It's just worksheets, but it's fun worksheets. They're colorful. The kids love them. I used this one in preschool just to introduce basic stuff that we've probably already introduced, but now, hey, look, we're going to do a worksheet with it. This book I found at a homeschool yard sale, which are really fun. It's too bad that we have COVID going on through all of this because that shut down all the yard sales. This is just a really basic book that when I get done going through the Good and the Beautiful preschool, but we're not done with the year, we start doing stuff in this book, and it just kind of reviews everything that they've already done. This was that math book that I bought for my first grader when I had absolutely no idea how to homeschool. It got us through stuff. We learned stuff. She learned stuff. I realized that I still hate estimating stuff. Always have, always will. It's in there. But my kids love this book. We don't hardly ever use it except for just like, hey, let's do a fun math day. Okay, here's a worksheet from this book. Okay, this is the Usborne My First Reading Library. I love this set. I know some people use it entirely to teach their kids how to read. That doesn't work for my kids. This is also part of it. These are just some of the books in it. The reason we love these books is because it goes back and forth with the kid reading and the parent reading. And that just makes it feel like such not as bad of a work for my kids to learn how to read.
So we haven't used this particular reading set, but I just wanted, while we were on this, to put a plug in for Usborne in general. I have never sold for them or anything, but we love Usborne books, especially their nonfiction ones, the smaller picture books that they have that are about this size, but they're meant for a slightly older audience. They are fantastic, and we just have tons of them on the shelves, and they're ones that the kids pull off all the time to read, and there's so much information packed into those, and Usborne does a really good job of fact checking and making sure things are accurate, and so we really have appreciated those books.
So these are Montessori touching letters. I don't know exactly what you would call them. We don't really do a ton with these. It's just a way for my kids to play with letters. And that's kind of the idea behind Montessori, is that you learn while you're playing. They kind of have like sand glued on them so you can feel what the letter shape feels like. And yeah, that's about it. These are one of our favorites. These are the Melissa and Doug word boards. That's what we call them. But they're just so fun to be able to touch the letters and find the ones that actually fit in there and then practice sounding them out. Most of the time, I don't get to actually sounding them out with my kids, but they get familiar with the letters.
Just take that off. Okay, so I have a few more curriculum that I didn't get pictures in time for, but I just wanted to share some of these with you. So the very first language arts curriculum that we used is called the Phonics Road to Reading and Spelling, and it's a complete language arts program. It's very classical, traditional, school at home type thing, and it is extremely intense, but it's also extremely thorough, and it's really, really good. And it comes in 4 different levels and of the Phonics Road, and then there's 3 additional levels of the Latin Road that continue on. So it's basically a kindergarten, pre-K, kindergarten, all the way up through high school language arts program. And it's really, really good. But it is intense. And so then we've gone through several different language arts programs. I mentioned I've used Good and Beautiful and other things like that. Currently, we are using one called the Logic of English, which is actually very similar to Phonics Road, but it's not quite as intense. It doesn't include composition, and it doesn't include, what's the other one? No, I think it's definitely spelling. Literature studies. So it doesn't include literature studies or composition. And I really appreciate Logic of English because it doesn't include those things, because those were things that my children were doing on their own at home anyway. They read books and talk about them all the time. They write their own stories all the time. So I didn't feel like composition or literature was something we needed to have a formal curriculum with. But Logic of English comes in a foundations set for learning to read, and then an essentials set for mostly focusing on spelling and grammar and things for later children. And I really like it because it is a lot, but I can teach multiple ages at the same time. So I have, in Essentials, they have 3 different levels. And so you can go through the curriculum 3 different times, once at each level. And depending on where your kids are, you can do all of it together and then just do the specific leveled portions for specific children. So it kind of cuts my teaching time down a little bit. Then we have some different math curriculum that we've used over the years. I mentioned Life of Fred, that we've used that. We also have used Matthew C., which is a video text where you watch videos and then do the workbook and work on that. And that one has a set of blocks that go with it that are really fun to build with. My kids just like to build with them, actually, just without doing the math curriculum. Another one that we have used is called Beast Academy, and that one is super fun because it is the guidebook is a graphic novel, and the kids love the comic book style stuff. And then there's a workbook that goes with it that's the practice book. And the really good things about Beast Academy are that it teaches puzzles and logic and problem solving. The negative is that it works really, really, really well for kids who are very math-minded, but if they're not math-minded, they don't often pick up on everything because it doesn't teach them step by step. It encourages them to think through things on their own, and sometimes kids just don't want to do that. So then on the other end of the spectrum, for just going straight and teaching just the basic math, simple algorithms and everything, there's a system called Learn Math Fast, and just the first 2 books, Volume 1 and Volume 2, cover all the basic math up through like exponents and fractions and decimals and things like that. And they start super basic, just adding and subtracting, but they use money to do it. And you're supposed to actually get money and practice with money. And kids, for some reason, just work really well with money. They like money, and so having it like be real world makes sense to them. And then the other math curriculum that we have liked, as some of I have 3 girls are my oldest, and as they have gotten older, they've gotten kind of annoyed with Life of Fred. They think that he's annoying, and but they love the storytelling and the real world application that Fred brings into math. But they just get annoyed with Fred. So one of the things that we have found is a book series by Danica McKellar, who was an actress on The Wonder Years and on Dancing with the Stars and stuff. But she actually majored in math and is fantastic. And she's written a whole series of books going from preschool all the way up to high school geometry. But the basic math one is called Math Doesn't Suck. And she goes through, like, they're geared towards teenage girls specifically, and they look like magazines that you would find, like, glamour girl type magazines. The book covers do, but inside they tell stories, and they're really fun, and they go through problem solving, like how to divide all the lipsticks that you just got among all your friends and things like that, and how many remainders will you have left over, and how will you be able to chop one up, and different things. And they go through, like, it's super, super fun. And so my kids have really enjoyed that. And she recently came out with some elementary books called Do Not Open This Math Book and The Times Machine. And those cover addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And those are also more comic book style, where she's going through explaining math concepts to a little mouse and then a little squirrel also. And they're really fun. And the kids, again, will just pull these off just to do them for fun. So the Math Doesn't Suck one is also fun. The future books after that are Kiss My Math, Hot X Algebra Exposed, and Girls Got Curves with the geometry one. And they are super fun for teenage girls. And my girls have loved them. In fact, one of my daughters absolutely hates math and can't stand it at all. And I keep finding her with this book, like even at the park. And it's a lot of fun. And I think that's all I've got.
I'm going to add in that it's not necessarily a curriculum, but the Usborne Science Encyclopedia is the best science book that we have ever bought. It's absolutely fantastic. And I don't sell Usborne either, although I was thinking that it might be worth the perks. We don't have any questions yet. And I want to answer questions if you have them. But I will take a break gladly if you don't have them. Okay, so if you guys ask your questions now, we will answer them when we come back. When we come back at 1 o'clock. So we're going to take a break now for lunch. And then when we come back, we've got the children's panels so that you can hear what it's like from a child's point of view, and you'll also be able to ask them questions. So you can start asking those questions now. Thanks.